I'm Lauren, 28 female. I live in a small but comfortable apartment in the city, a place that has always been my sanctuary from the chaos of the outside world, and particularly from my family. As a financial analyst, my life is governed by numbers, patterns, and logic, things that make sense, things that are predictable. It's a stark contrast to the life my older sister, Isabella, leads, which is all about appearances, social climbing, and drama. For years, I was the quiet shadow to her blinding light, a role I had accepted out of a desperate need for peace. But one night, at her own engagement party, she decided that wasn't enough. She needed to extinguish my light completely. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. Our childhood home was less a house and more a stage. My parents, both successful in their own right, had crafted a life that looked perfect from the outside. Manicured lawns, tasteful decorations, and two daughters who were meant to be the crowning jewels of their legacy. Isabella, older by 4 years, embraced her role as the star of the show with a natural flair. She was beautiful, charismatic, and effortlessly popular. I, on the other hand, was the quiet, studious one, the girl who preferred books to parties and deep conversations to shallow pleasantries. My parents didn't quite know what to do with me, so they mostly left me in Isabella's orbit, hoping some of her sparkle would rub off. It never did. Instead, I learned to navigate her world by making myself as small and unobtrusive as possible. Isabella wasn't just charismatic, she was a master manipulator. She knew how to twist words, how to play the victim, and how to make anyone who crossed her feel like they were the problem. I was her favorite target. For years, she honed her skills on me. It started with small things. Borrowing my favorite sweater and accidentally ruining it, telling our parents I was the one who broke a vase, or spreading a silly rumor about me at school. Each time I tried to stand up for myself, she would turn on the waterworks, claiming I was being overly sensitive or jealous. Our parents, eager to maintain the illusion of a perfect family, always took her side. "Just apologize and make up, girls," was their standard response. So I learned to swallow my anger and my words, letting her win every battle for the sake of a fragile peace. When Isabella announced her engagement to Mark, it was the social event of the year in our circle. Mark was, by all accounts, a perfect match for her. He was a successful surgeon, handsome, kind, and from a good family. He seemed genuinely in love with Isabella, and for a while I dared to hope that his presence would soften her. In the beginning, it almost seemed like it would. When Mark was around, Isabella was the best version of herself, attentive, loving, and surprisingly considerate. She even made an effort with me, inviting me out for lunch and asking for my opinion on wedding details. It was a pleasant change, but a small, cynical part of me knew it was just another performance. She wasn't changing. She was just expanding her stage to include a new lead actor. The engagement party was to be held at our parents' lavish estate. Isabella, a marketing director with a flair for the dramatic, had planned every detail herself. It was to be a grand affair under the stars, with a string quartet, catered food from the city's finest restaurant, and a guest list that read like a who's who of local society. I was, of course, expected to be there, playing my role as the devoted younger sister. I bought a new dress, a simple but elegant navy blue gown that I felt comfortable in, and prepared myself for an evening of smiling, nodding, and avoiding my sister's critical gaze. For the most part, the evening started well. I mingled with relatives I hadn't seen in years, caught up with a few old family friends, and even shared a pleasant conversation with Mark's parents, who were warm and welcoming. Mark found me by the fountain, away from the main throng of guests. He had a glass of champagne in each hand and offered one to me with a smile that, unlike my sister's, always reached his eyes. "Hiding from the madness?" he asked. I laughed. "Something like that. It's a beautiful party. Isabella has outdone herself." "She always does," he said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. "But I think she's been a little stressed. Have you noticed? She seems a bit on edge tonight." I had noticed. Isabella had been snapping at the catering staff and shooting daggers at anyone who wasn't paying her enough attention. It was classic Isabella behavior, amplified by the pressure of the event. I just shrugged. It's a big night for her. I'm sure it's just nerves. Mark nodded, though he still looked concerned. You're proba. Bly right, I just want everything to be perfect for her. He looked at me then, a sincere kindness in his eyes. I'm really glad we're going to be family, Lauren. Isabella talks about you all the time. She really looks up to you. The words hit me like a splash of cold water. Isabella looks up to me? It was the most absurd thing I had ever heard. I managed a weak smile, mumbling something noncommittal. Inside, I felt a familiar mix of confusion and anger. It was a classic Isabella move, presenting a carefully curated version of our relationship to the world, one where she was the loving older sister who admired her quiet, intelligent sibling. It was a lie, a beautiful, polished lie, and Mark had bought it completely. How could he not? He was in love. He saw the woman she pretended to be, not the one she was when the curtains were down. We chatted for a few more minutes before he was pulled away by one of his colleagues. I stayed by the fountain, the champagne tasting bitter in my mouth. The party was a gilded cage, and I was just one of the birds, expected to sing on cue. I watched my sister across the lawn, laughing as she held court, a dazzling smile on her face. She was the perfect bride-to-be, the star of her own perfect show. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that the performance was far from over. The air grew cooler as the night wore on, and the string quartet transitioned to a more upbeat playlist. Guests were laughing, glasses were clinking, and my sister was in her element, flitting from one group to another like a social butterfly. I had found a quiet corner on the edge of the patio, content to observe from a distance. My best friend, Sophie, was supposed to be there, but a last-minute family emergency had kept her away. I missed her presence. Sophie was the only one who saw Isabella for who she truly was. She was my anchor in the stormy sea of my family's dynamics. Without her, I felt adrift, surrounded by people who only saw the carefully constructed surface. I was checking my phone for a message from her when I heard my sister's voice, sharp and commanding, cut through the party's cheerful hum. Lauren, over here. Now. I looked up to see Isabella standing near the arched entrance to the rose garden, her smile gone and her eyes flashing with irritation. She beckoned me with an impatient flick of her wrist. A familiar knot of dread tightened in my stomach. This was the Isabella I knew, the one who appeared when the audience was distracted. I excused myself from the elderly couple I had been chatting with and made my way over to her. "What's wrong?" I asked, keeping my voice low. "Don't what's wrong me," she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. She grabbed my arm, her manicured nails digging into my skin. "We need to talk, in private." Before I could protest, she was dragging me off the patio and into the dimly lit rose garden, her grip surprisingly strong. The sweet scent of the roses was cloying, almost suffocating. She pulled me behind a large, ornate trellis, effectively hiding us from the view of the party guests. "What is your problem tonight?" she demanded, releasing my arm with a shove. "My problem? I don't have a problem," I said, rubbing the sore spot on my arm. "You're the one who dragged me out here." "Oh, don't play innocent with me," she sneered. "I saw you talking to Mark. What were you saying to him? Were you filling his head with your pathetic stories, trying to make him feel sorry for you?" The accusation was so ludicrous, so completely backward, that for a moment I could only stare at her. "I was congratulating him, Isabella. We were talking about you, about the party." "Liar," she spat. "You've always been jealous of me. You can't stand to see me happy. You want to ruin this for me just like you try to ruin everything." Her voice was rising, a shrill, ugly sound in the peaceful garden. I glanced back toward the patio, praying no one could hear us. "That's not true, and you know it," I said, my own voice trembling with a mixture of anger and fear. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you're wearing that dress," she said, her eyes raking over me with contempt. "You knew I wanted a soft pastels theme for the inner circle. That navy blue monstrosity makes you stick out like a sore thumb. You did it on purpose, to draw attention away from me." I was dumbfounded. The dress? This was about my dress? It was a simple, classic gown, tasteful, understated, and she had never mentioned a color theme to me. It was another one of her games, another manufactured reason to pick a fight. "I had no idea about a color theme, Issa. You never said anything." "Of course I did, you just never listen," she shrieked. You've been a thorn in my side my entire life, always moping in the corner, making everyone feel awkward. You're a black cloud, Lauren. A miserable, jealous little black cloud, and you're trying to rain on my perfect day." The words, cruel and sharp, SDR, uck me with the force of a physical blow. They were the same insults she had hurled at me since we were children, the same accusations designed to make me feel small and worthless. For years, I had absorbed them, letting them chip away at my self-worth. But tonight, something inside me snapped. Maybe it was the blatant absurdity of her lie about the dress, or the memory of Mark's kind, trusting face, or just the sheer exhaustion of playing her game for 2 decades. "No," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "No, you don't get to do this anymore." Her eyes widened in shock. I never fought back. I was supposed to cower, to apologize, to absorb her rage until it subsided. "Excuse me," she said, her tone dripping with disbelief. "You heard me," I continued, feeling a surge of adrenaline. "This isn't about my dress, this is about you. You can't stand it when you're not the absolute center of everyone's universe for even a second. You have a wonderful man who loves you, a beautiful party, everything you've ever wanted, and it's still not enough. You have to find someone to tear down to feel powerful, and you always pick me." "How dare you," she whispered, her face pale with fury. "I'm not the one who's jealous, Isabella." "You are," I pressed on, the words tumbling out of me now, a torrent of suppressed truth. "You're jealous that I have a life that doesn't revolve around you. You're jealous that I don't need constant validation from strangers. You're jealous that for all your perfect planning and social climbing, you are deeply, pathologically insecure." She recoiled as if I had slapped her. For a moment, a flicker of something raw and ugly crossed her face, a flash of the truth she could never admit. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a cold, hard mask of rage. "You are dead to me," she seethed, her voice dangerously low. "You think you're so smart with your little analysis. You know nothing. After I marry Mark, you won't be a part of my life. I'll make sure of it. You'll be nothing. Alone, just like you've always been." She turned on her heel and stormed away, leaving me standing alone in the dark garden, the scent of roses now smelling like decay. My heart was pounding, and my hands were shaking. I had finally said it. I had finally spoken the truth. But the victory felt hollow, overshadowed by the venom in her final words and a sickening sense of dread. I didn't know then that our ugly confrontation hadn't been as private as we'd thought. We had an audience, and the fallout was about to be more catastrophic than I could ever have imagined. I stood frozen behind the trellis, my sister's parting words echoing in the silence of the garden. The adrenaline that had fueled my outburst drained away, leaving me feeling shaky and hollow. The distant sounds of the party, music, laughter, the clinking of glasses seemed to come from another world. In here, in the cool, fragrant darkness, there was only the ringing in my ears and the thumping of my own heart. I leaned against the rough wood of the trellis, closing my eyes and trying to catch my breath. Had I really said all that? After a lifetime of silence, the dam had finally broken. A part of me felt a fierce, liberating pride, but another, larger part was filled with a cold, terrifying dread. I had just declared war on my sister, and Isabella did not lose wars. I replayed her final threat in my mind. "After I marry Mark, you won't be a part of my life. I'll make sure of it." She was capable of it, I knew. She could spin a story so convincing that she'd have our entire family and all our mutual friends turning their backs on me. She would paint me as the jealous, bitter sister who tried to ruin her happiness, and people would believe her. They always did. I felt a wave of despair wash over me. Maybe I should have just kept my mouth shut, endured the insults about my dress, and let her have her moment. But the thought of apologizing, of once again validating her cruelty, made my stomach churn. I couldn't go back to being her doormat. I just couldn't. After a few minutes of composing myself, I decided I couldn't face the party again. I just wanted to go home, to crawl into my own bed and shut out the world. I smoothed down my dress and took a deep breath, preparing to make a quiet exit. I would find my parents, make a polite excuse about a headache, and slip away unnoticed. As I stepped out from behind the trellis, I nearly collided with a figure standing in the shadows just a few feet away. I gasped, my heart leaping into my throat. The figure stepped forward into a patch of moonlight, and my blood ran cold. It was Mark. His face was pale, his expression unreadable. He wasn't holding a drink anymore. His hands were shoved deep into the pockets of his tailored trousers. He just stood there, looking at me, and the silence stretched for an eternity. "Mark," I finally managed to whisper, my voice hoarse. "How long have you been standing there?" "Long enough," he said. His voice was flat, devoid of the warmth it usually held. My mind raced, trying to figure out how much he had heard. Had he heard Isabella's tirade? Had he heard my response? Had he heard everything? The answer was in his eyes, a mixture of shock, confusion, and a deep, unsettling disappointment. He had heard it all. "I came looking for Isabella," he explained, his gaze shifting from me to the path she had taken back to the party. "Her mother said she was looking for you. I was about to call out to you both when I heard her yelling." My stomach twisted into a painful knot. This was a nightmare, a complete and utter nightmare. He had witnessed the ugly truth behind the perfect facade, the truth I had spent my whole life helping to conceal. "Mark, I'm so sorry," I stammered, not even sure what I was apologizing for. For fighting with my sister, for the things I said, for shattering his perfect image of the woman he was about to marry. "You have nothing to be sorry for, Lauren," he said quietly, his eyes meeting mine again. The look in them wasn't anger, not at me anyway. It was something else, something I couldn't quite decipher. It looked like disillusionment. Is she often like that?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The question hung in the air between us, heavy with consequence. My answer could either confirm his worst fears or help my sister salvage her lie. For a fleeting second, the old habit of protecting Isabella kicked in. I could lie. I could say she was just stressed, that she wasn't herself tonight. It would be so easy. It was the path of least resistance, the one I had walked my entire life. But then I looked at Mark's face, at the genuine pain and confusion in his eyes. He wasn't just Isabella's fiancé. He was a good man, a kind man who deserved the truth. He deserved to know who he was marrying. I took a slow breath and gave him the only answer I could. "Yes," I said, my voice soft but clear. "She is." I didn't elaborate. I didn't need to. The single word was enough. I saw a flicker of understanding and then a deep sadness pass over his features. He nodded slowly, his gaze dropping to the ground. He looked like a man whose world had just been tilted off its axis. He didn't ask any more questions. What was there to say? He had heard the venom in Isabella's voice, her baseless accusations, her deep-seated cruelty. He had heard my desperate, long-suppressed defense. The evidence was irrefutable. We stood in silence for another moment before he finally spoke again. "I think I need some air," he said, gesturing vaguely toward the far end of the garden. "Please don't say anything, not tonight." "I won't," I promised. He gave me one last, conflicted look before turning and walking away, disappearing into the darker, more secluded parts of the estate's sprawling grounds. I watched him go, my heart aching for him. My fight with Isabella was no longer a private war. It now had a crucial witness, and the fallout was going to be far greater than just my relationship with my sister. It had the power to destroy her carefully constructed future. As I made my way back toward the house, keeping to the shadows, I saw Isabella near the patio doors, her perfect smile plastered back on her face as she talked to a group of guests. She scanned the crowd, her eyes searching. She was looking for Mark. A cold chill ran down my spine. She had no idea that her fiancé had just overheard the tirade that revealed her true nature. But she would find out soon. And when she did, she would come for me. I managed to slip out of the party without speaking to anyone else. I sent a quick text to my parents claiming a sudden migraine, a believable excuse given my history of stress-induced headaches, and drove home in a daze. My quiet apartment, usually a source of comfort, felt like a holding cell. I was waiting. I didn't know what for exactly, but I knew that the night was not over. The confrontation in the garden had set something in motion, and I was terrified of the consequences. I replayed the scene with Mark over and over in my mind. The shock on his face, the quiet devastation in his voice. I had handed him a truth he never asked for, a truth that could unravel his entire future. Part of me felt guilty for the pain I had caused him, but a stronger part knew he deserved to know who he was committing his life to. It was almost 2 a.m. when my phone buzzed, shattering the silence. I knew who it was before I even looked. Isabella. I ignored the first call, my heart pounding against my ribs. It rang again immediately, and again, on the 4th call I finally answered, my hand trembling slightly. "Hello? Where are you?" Her voice was not the furious shriek from the garden, but something far more frightening, a low, controlled, icy calm. "I'm at home. I had a headache," I lied weakly. "Don't lie to me, you pathetic little snake," she hissed. "Mark is gone. He left the party an hour ago without a word to me. His parents don't know where he is. He's not answering his phone. This is because of you. What did you say to him?" "I didn't say anything to him," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "He found me in the garden after you left. He heard us, Isabella. He heard everything." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line, followed by a dead, terrifying silence. For a full 30 seconds, the only sound was the hum of my refrigerator. I could almost feel her mind racing, processing this new, catastrophic variable. The master planner had made a fatal error, and her perfect world was beginning to crumble. When she finally spoke again, her tone had shifted completely. The anger was gone, replaced by a desperate, wheedling tone I hadn't heard from her since we were children, and she was trying to talk her way out of trouble with our parents. "Lauren," she said, her voice syrupy sweet. "Lori, please, you have to help me." The use of my childhood nickname was a calculated move designed to evoke a sense of sisterly loyalty that she herself had spent years destroying. "Help you? How could I possibly help you? You have to talk to him," she said, the words coming in a rush. "You have to tell him you were lying. Tell him you were upset about something, that you were jealous and you made it all up to hurt me. Tell him you do this all the time, that you're unstable. He'll believe you. He likes you. He thinks you're honest." The audacity of her request was breathtaking. She wanted me to not only lie for her, but to destroy my own character in the process. She wanted me to paint myself as a malicious, unstable liar to save her relationship. "No," I said, the word tasting like freedom. "Absolutely not. Please," she begged, and I could hear the genuine panic in her voice now. "Lauren, you don't understand. Everything is on the line. My future, my life with him. I love him." "Do you?" I asked, the question sharp and pointed. "Do you love him, or do you love the idea of him? Do you love the status, the perfect life, the envy of your friends? Because people who love each other don't treat the other person's family the way you treat me. They don't build their relationship on a foundation of lies." "You don't know anything about my relationship," she sobbed. It was a masterful performance, the tears of a wronged woman. But I had seen this act too many times. It didn't work on me anymore. "I know what I heard in the garden," I said calmly. "And so does Mark. I will not lie to him for you, Isabella. You made this mess. You have to fix it yourself." "You owe me," she suddenly screamed, the desperation giving way to her true, entitled nature. "I'm your sister. Our family will be humiliated. Do you have any idea what this will do to Mom and Dad? They'll be a laughingstock. You're selfish. You've always been selfish." She threw every weapon she had at me: guilt, family duty, social shame. They were the same tactics that had worked on me for years, the ones that had kept me in line, kept me silent. But they were like arrows bouncing off armor. The girl who used to flinch at her sister's anger was gone, replaced by a woman who was finally seeing her own worth. "This isn't about Mom and Dad, and it isn't about me being selfish," I said, my voice steady. "This is about Mark. He's a good person, and he deserves to make a choice based on the truth. If he decides to stay with you after knowing who you really are, then that's his decision. But I won't be the one to trick him into it." I could hear her sputtering on the other end, momentarily speechless. I had taken away her power by refusing to play her game. "I will never forgive you for this," she finally whispered, her voice filled with a chilling hatred. "You've just ruined my life. I hope you're happy." "I'm not happy, Issa," I said softly, and it was the truth. I'm sad. I'm sad that it has come to this." I ended the call before she could respond, my finger pressing the screen with a sense of finality. I sank onto my sofa, the silence of the apartment feeling heavy around me. The bargain had been offered, the desperate plea made and rejected. Now, there was nothing left to do but wait for the dawn and the inevitable fallout. I had chosen my truth over her lie, and in doing so, I had sealed both of our fates. The next 2 days were spent in a state of suspended animation. I called in sick to work, unable to face the spreadsheets and data that usually brought me a sense of order. My mind was a chaotic whirlwind of anxiety and anticipation. I heard nothing from Isabella, which was more unnerving than her screaming would have been. Silence was her weapon of choice when she was plotting. I also heard nothing from Mark. I scrolled through his social media, a new and unsettling habit, but it was all professional posts and old photos of him and Isabella, smiling and happy. It was like looking at a portrait of a life that no longer existed. My phone remained silent, and the lack of news was a torment. Did he go back to her? Did she manage to convince him I was the crazy one? Was I about to be ostracized by my entire family? My parents called on Sunday afternoon. My mother's voice was strained, her usual cheerful tone replaced with a brittle formality. "Lauren, your father and I are very concerned," she began. "Isabella is distraught. She said you had a terrible argument at the party and that you said some very hurtful things." I braced myself. She was the one who was screaming at me, Mom. "Now, Lauren, your sister was under a lot of pressure," she said dismissively, falling back into her role as Isabella's lifelong defender. "And Mark well, he's asked for some space. He's staying with his brother for a few days. Isabella is convinced you said something to him to upset him." It was a masterful twist of the narrative. In Isabella's version, I was the sole antagonist, the one who had driven a wedge between the happy couple. There was no mention of Mark overhearing our fight. "I didn't have to say anything to him, Mom. He heard you," I said plainly. "He was in the garden. He heard how she spoke to me." There was a pause on the line. I could almost hear my mother recalibrating, trying to fit this new piece of information into her perfect family puzzle. "Well," she finally said, "I'm sure it was just a misunderstanding. Whatever he thought he heard, it can be smoothed over. Family is the most important thing, Lauren. Isabella is going to need you to help fix this. You need to call Mark and explain." "Explain what?" I asked, my frustration mounting. "Explain that my sister is a cruel, manipulative bully, but he should marry her anyway." "Don't use that tone with me," my mother snapped. "This is your sister's future. You will call him and you will apologize for your part in this. You will tell him you were emotional and exaggerated things. That's what a good sister would do." The conversation ended with me giving a noncommittal answer and my mother hanging up in a huff. The weight of my family's expectations settled on my shoulders, a familiar, suffocating burden. They didn't want the truth. They wanted a solution, a quick fix that would restore the family's pristine public image. They wanted me to sacrifice my integrity on the altar of their comfort. For the rest of the day, I was at war with myself. The part of me that had been conditioned for 28 years to seek their approval, to be the good daughter, urged me to just make the call. What was one more lie in a lifetime of them? But the new, stronger part of me, the part that had found its voice in the garden, refused. It was a matter of principle. It was about Mark's right to the truth, but it was also about my right to my own. That evening, just as I was about to turn off my phone and retreat into the oblivion of sleep, an email notification popped up on my screen. The sender's name made my heart stop. It was from Mark. The subject line was simple: "Can we talk?" My hands trembled as I opened it. The message was short and to the point. "Lauren, I know I asked you not to say anything, but I can't make sense of this on my own. I've been replaying that night over and over in my head. Isabella has been calling and texting, telling me a version of events where you are not well. I need to hear your side of the story. Would you be willing to meet me for coffee tomorrow morning? Just to talk. Please, Mark." Relief and terror washed over me in equal measure. He hadn't just taken Isabella's word for it. He was seeking the truth, but in doing so, he was placing the final, terrible choice squarely in my hands. This was it. This was the moment where my words would either cement the destruction of my sister's relationship or condemn a good man to a life built on deceit. There would be no hiding, no ambiguity. I would have to look him in the eye and tell him everything. The weight of silence was about to be replaced by the weight of my words, and I wasn't sure which was heavier. I sat there for a long time, the glow of the screen illuminating my face in the dark room. Then, with a deep, resolute breath, I typed my reply. "Yes, I'll be there." The coffee shop Mark chose was a small, quiet place in a neighborhood neither of us frequented. It was a neutral ground, a place devoid of memories or associations. I arrived a few minutes early, my stomach a knot of nerves. I chose a small table in the corner, wanting as much privacy as possible. When Mark walked in, he looked tired. There were dark circles under his eyes, and the easy smile that I was used to was gone, replaced by a tense, worried expression. He gave me a small, grateful nod as he sat down, and we ordered coffee in near silence. The silence lingered even after the waitress left. It wasn't awkward, but it was heavy, filled with all the things that needed to be said. He was the one who finally broke it. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice low. "I know this is difficult." "It's okay," I said, though it was anything but, "How are you?" He let out a short, humorless laugh. "I don't know what I am, confused, angry, hurt. I feel like the last 3 years of my life might have been a complete lie." He looked down at his hands, which were wrapped around his coffee cup. "When I met Isabella, she was everything I thought I wanted. Confident, smart, beautiful. She told me stories about your family, about your childhood. She painted you as this quiet, brilliant sister who she was so proud of. She made your relationship sound idyllic." "That's the word she would use," I said with a wry smile. "Isabella is very good with words. She's a marketer. She knows how to sell an idea." "The woman I heard in the garden that night," he continued, his voice dropping, "was not the woman I proposed to. The things she said to you, the hatred in her voice, I've never seen that side of her, not once." "Because she never wanted you to," I explained softly. "That side is for me. It's for anyone she can't control or who she sees as a threat. With you, with my parents, with her friends, she's the person you know. It's a performance, Mark, and it's a very convincing one." I then proceeded to tell him everything. I didn't do it with malice or glee. I laid out the facts of my life with Isabella as calmly and objectively as I could. I told him about the small cruelties of our childhood, the constant gaslighting, the way she would sabotage my friendships or my school projects and then play the innocent victim. I told him how she had to be the center of attention at all times, how she couldn't stand to see anyone else succeed or be happy if it somehow took the spotlight off of her. I told him about her jealousy, her insecurity, and the deep-seated need to control the narrative of her life, even if it meant lying and manipulating the people who loved her most. As I spoke, I saw a progression of emotions. On his face, first there was shock, then dawning comprehension, and finally a profound sadness. He wasn't just losing a fiancé, he was mourning the woman he thought he knew, the woman who had never really existed. "Why?" he finally asked when I had finished. "Why did you all put up with it for so long, your parents? You?" "Because it was easier," I said, the truth of it tasting bitter. "Confronting Isabella means drama, and my parents hate drama. They wanted a perfect family, so they ignored the cracks. And me, I just wanted peace. I thought if I stayed quiet, if I just let her have her way, she would eventually leave me alone. I was wrong." "She told me you were unstable," he said quietly, looking me directly in the eye. "She said you've always been jealous of her and that you make up stories to get attention. She said you had a breakdown in the garden because you couldn't handle the happiness of her engagement." The accusations, so vile and calculated, still had the power to wound me. "And what do you think, Mark?" I asked, my voice steady. He was silent for a long time, just looking at me. His gaze was intense, searching. It felt like he was looking past my words, past my story, and into my very soul, trying to find the truth. "I think," he said finally, his voice thick with emotion, "that a person's true character is revealed in how they treat those they have nothing to gain from. The way she spoke to you that night, when she thought no one was listening, that was the truth." He reached across the table and briefly touched my hand. It wasn't a romantic gesture, but one of solidarity, of apology. "I'm sorry, Lauren. I'm so sorry for what you've had to endure, and I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." In that moment, the weight I had been carrying for years finally lifted. I had been seen, I had been heard, I had been believed. It was a vindication so powerful it brought tears to my eyes. We sat for a while longer, talking about less painful things, about our jobs, our hobbies, the city we lived in. It was a strange, sad kind of intimacy, two people connected by the unraveling of a lie. When we left the coffee shop, the future was still uncertain, but the past had been laid bare. Mark had a decision to make, but I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones that he would not be marrying my sister. The unveiling was complete. All that was left was the aftermath. The end of Isabella and Mark's engagement was not the explosive, dramatic event I had braced myself for. It was quiet, swift, and brutal in its finality. The day after our coffee, Mark went to the apartment he shared with my sister, packed his belongings while she was at work, and left. He left the ridiculously expensive engagement ring on the polished marble countertop in the kitchen, next to a simple, one-page letter. Isabella didn't call me to scream or cry. She didn't call me at all. I found out from our mother, whose voice on the phone was a cocktail of fury and disbelief. "He's gone," she shrieked. "He left her. Because of you. Your father and I are on our way over there now. I cannot believe you have done this to your sister, to this family." She hung up before I could say a word. In the days that followed, I was completely cut off. My parents and Isabella formed a united front, a fortress of blame with me on the outside. My texts went unanswered, my calls went straight to voicemail. The official story, the one they told to concerned friends and family, was that Mark had gotten cold feet, that he was emotionally unstable and had broken my poor sister's heart. My name was never mentioned. In their revised reality, I had become a non-entity. The backlash from the wider family was subtle but unmistakable. Aunts who usually called for my birthday remained silent. Cousins I was close to suddenly became distant. The narrative that Isabella and my parents were weaving was working. I was being slowly and methodically erased. The only person who stood by me was Sophie. She was my rock, the one person I could talk to without filter. "Let them go," she told me one evening as we sat in my apartment with a bottle of wine. "They're showing you who they've always been. You just finally refused to play your part. You're free, Lauren." She was right. As painful as the ostracism was, there was also a profound sense of liberation. The constant anxiety of waiting for Isabella's next move, the emotional gymnastics of navigating my family's dynamics, it was all gone. The silence they were punishing me with was, in its own way, a gift. It was a quiet, empty space where I could finally begin to heal. About a month after the breakup, I received a short, unexpected text from a number I didn't recognize. "It's Mark. I just wanted to say thank you, for the truth. I hope you're okay." I texted back, telling him I was fine and that I hoped he was too. There was no further communication. It was a clean break, a final closing of a painful chapter for B. Both of us, the story should have ended there, but with Isabella, things are never that simple. The truth, once let out of the cage, has a way of finding its own path. A few months later, I ran into one of Isabella's bridesmaids at the grocery store. She was an old friend from high school whom Isabella had collected for her bridal party. The girl looked deeply uncomfortable when she saw me, but after a moment of hesitation, she walked over. "Lauren, hey," she said awkwardly. "Listen, I wanted to apologize." "For what?" I asked, confused. "For believing Isabella," she said, her cheeks flushing. "She told us all this crazy story about you trying to sabotage her wedding. But then, well, you know how she is. Her stories started to unravel. She'd say one thing to one person and something else to another. And then a mutual friend of ours who knows Mark's brother told me the real reason Mark left. That he overheard Isabella being Isabella," she sighed. "A few of us have started comparing notes from over the years. We're realizing she's done this kind of thing to a lot of people. We just never talked about it. I'm sorry we iced you out. You didn't deserve that." It was a small thing, a brief conversation in the produce aisle, but it meant the world to me. The truth was echoing out into the world, far beyond my control. Isabella's carefully constructed world, built on a foundation of lies and manipulation, was beginning to crumble under its own weight. She couldn't control the narrative anymore. I still don't have a relationship with my parents or my sister. The chasm between us is too wide, filled with too many years of unspoken truths and willful blindness. I've accepted that. I'm building a new life, one based on honesty and mutual respect, surrounded by people like Sophie who value me for who I am, not for the role I'm supposed to play. Sometimes I feel a pang of sadness for the family I wish I had, for the sister I never got. But the peace I've found, the quiet confidence that comes from standing in my own truth, is worth more than any gilded cage. My sister wanted me to lie to keep her perfect man and her perfect life. But in the end, it was the truth that set us all free. She is free to live with the consequences of her actions, Mark is free to find a love that is real, and I, finally, am free to be myself.